2 years back.
Are you, excuse me, are you all in the United States?
No, I'm in Canada.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Who's in Canada? Raul?
Myself and David, yes.
Oh, both of you are Canadians.
Yeah.
I'm half
Nice to
Canadian,
know.
so I think
Yeah,
I'm in
we live on Ireland.
California. So
I see.
Great.
I have a sister in Canada and many nieces.
oh,
Where are you, Josephine?
I'm in the Philippines.
Okay,
Oh, well,
nice.
okay.
Okay, let's
Well,
begin the show with welcome to the Fertile Brains, a place where poets meet to share their hearts and my minds. Sorry, viewers, sorry I couldn't able to turn my video on, and I beg your pardon since the network is terribly bad here. Without having much ado of the thing, let us begin our show. Um, Peace and harmony, end to the war and the hatred can only happen when we know each other. We are the earth and we are the people. Fertile Brands is initiative for the peace and poetry has started. Poets speak of poets in the month of August 2024. And the tagline of the we are the world and we are the people, as you all know, that highlights the purpose of the program is to bring the world closer and erase all borders to the literature. Poets, our honorable guest, would be talking about legendary poets from their country or elsewhere. It is our pleasure and honor to invite our respective poets who would be talking about their choice of poets. Each poet would be given 15 minutes to present and to talk about the contribution of respective, luminary. In the previous episode, with Mr. Henry L. Jones has talked about Longstand Hughes. Miss Martina Gallegos talked about Amado Nervo. Mr. Dustin Pickering talked about Bob Dylan. Miss Cheryl J. Jackson talked about Lucille Clifton. And today we had the honor of wonderful guests. And they are Miss Ma'am Josephine Gomez, who will be talking about Marne Kilates. Mr. David Leo Siroa would be talking about Rainer Maria Rilke. Miss Isabel Van Merlin would be talking about Emily Dickinson. And our lovely Mr. Raoul I am James would be talking about George Eliot Clark. We also had usually used to have a co-host along with me, Professor of Sri Venkateswara College, Delhi University, Dr. Roopali Sircar Gaur, who is a mentor and guide of this Fertile Brains group. But she couldn't make it today due to some emergency. So without her, we would be proceeding the show. Let us begin and the show. The order would be like as I announced it, introduced. The order goes like that. So without wasting much of your time, let me introduce Ma'am Josephine Gomez. Ma'am Josephine Gomez. And I got a wonderful bio, but I'm afraid I could read it to go through such a big, such a long and overwhelming thing. And it says it's abridged, but that's really She's from basically from Philippines and a modern Renaissance woman. Josephine Gomez is the author and lecturer of 36 short courses in both verbal and non-verbal communication, language, speech, and voice. A classical singer, filmmaker, a theater actor, visual artist, a print and broadcast journalist, a voice therapy and rehabilitation specialist, a language educator, book co-author, editor, translator, and multi-awarded poet whose works have been included in 15 international anthologies. She has pioneered voice therapy and rehabilitation in Philippines as an allied medical practice and founded the country's first Center for the Treatment of Voice Disorders, Transient Disability, and Vocal Deficiency. In Josephine Gomez Center for Voice Training and Wellness, she teaches voice for singing and speaking. Today, she would be talking about Marne Kilates. So, please welcome Ma'am Josephine Gomez. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you very
So,
much,
Rana,
Prasanna.
you and to talk about Marne Kilates. Thank you.
Good evening to you, Prasanna. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And good evening to my fellow poets who will be presenting as well. Let me begin by reciting to you one of the beautiful poems of the poet I'll be presenting. The title is Moon Game. In the darkest night after a September thunderstorm, the moon lifted the hem of a cloud and peered around, its silver glimmering, lighting the edges of the rain shower. The children have been called home by their parents from their dusk games, and of course, to avoid the recurring rain, which was like soldiers marching in the rice fields. But the moon winked at them. Come, he said, we have time for one more game of hide and seek or a game of tag, and we can splash the puddles. The night deepened, and again the parents called from their lighted huts before turning down the kerosene lamps and lowering the shutters. Again, all was quiet. Only the leaves breathed before the cicadas twittered. No one spoke until one boy, left out of the games, made his way home and heard the moon call out his name. For the first time, he thought it was how the moon shared with him its secret poem. This was shared by Marne Kilates on his Facebook recently. Okay, that's the first poem of Marne that I will be reading. Now let me introduce to you this multi-awarded poet, author of 6 poetry books and 3 in the making, meaning to say 3 more poetry books are actually in various stages of production. And apart from these, he has around a dozen other books, coffee table books, and books that are not about poetry and which are not with poetry. And he has about a dozen translations of poetry by well-known Filipino authors like national artist Rio Alma, Fidel Aurelio, Bernard Bienvenido Lumbera, and Rogelio Mangajas. Marne Kilates, who was born 71 years ago, or 72 years ago rather, was born in Daraga Albay in southeastern Luzon. Luzon is the first geographical region in the Philippines. It is the northernmost of the 3 geographical regions. And you know that the Philippines has about 7,400 plus islands. And in 1978, he came to work in Manila, and he joined the literary workshops of national artist Rio Alma, the National Writers' Workshops of the University of the Philippines and Silliman University Writers' Workshop. From 1980 to 2005, he worked as an advertising copywriter and moved up the ranks until he became its executive creative director when he left the company in 2005. He left the industry to become a freelance communications consultant. And all this time, he had been winning several awards from top poetry competitions in the Philippines, like the Don Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards for Poetry and the National Book Development Board, a Manila Critics Circle National Book Award for Poetry Writing. In 1998, he won the Southeast Asia Write Award given by the Kingdom of Thailand. And in 2013, he was named Poet of the Year in the Nick Joaquin Literary Awards of the Philippine Graphic Magazine, a very well-known literary magazine in the Philippines. In 2072, he became the holder of the professorial chair for creative writing at the Ateneo de Manila University, one of the top universities in the Philippines. Let me mention to you that Marnie Quilate's books are published by 4 top publications in the Philippines: the University of the Philippines Press, the University of Santo Tomas Press, the Ateneo de Manila Press, Ateneo de Manila University Press, and the San Anselmo Publishing Company. And you know, here in the Philippines, and I believe in any part of the world, when your works are published by a university press, that means your acceptance by the academe and that you are a very well-respected author. Now, let me go on further. His other awards are Bulaan na Bicolnon of Ateneo de Naga University. Naga is a city in Bicol region where he hails from. And he also became the outstanding citizen of Albay in the literary arts. In 2016, he received the Gawad Pambansang Alagad ni Balagtas, a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Union ng mga Manunulat sa Pilipinas, or the Writers Union of the Philippines. Marnie Quilates is largely self-taught, you know. He actually was a very voracious reader from childhood, and he spent hours at the public library in his hometown, devouring the encyclopedia and the works of and reading the works of local poets and novelists. At age 12, he became an altar boy, and he would usually sit atop a hill watching the Mayon volcano, which is actually the world's the volcano with the world's most perfect cone. And he would actually gaze at it and maybe feel poetry within him. He was an altar boy in the centuries-old church on that hilltop. And he would do this observation of the Mayon volcano after his duty hours. Later, he spent a semester in the Divine Word College in Legazpi City, reading beyond his college literature. He was by then determined to become a poet. His early influences were a taciturn father, a school teacher who gave him science books and picture books, and his mother, who was a bookworm. His eldest brother was a painter who read a lot. He influenced Marnie Quilate's lifetime love for the arts. And his second elder brother played many musical instruments, another reason why Marnie loves music. At the time of his death, which was very recently, this was 42 days ago, Marnie was a member of the board of directors of the Philippine Center of International Poets, Essayists, and Novelists, more popularly known internationally as the Pen. And he was referred to by the Pen as a tireless poet. May I read some more of Marnie's poems?
Go ahead, ma'am.
All right. 1 minute, please. And Marnie will always be remembered as a luminary by his contemporaries. Just 1 minute. Oh, here. This poem particularly talks about his love for his country. Oh, by the way, during the martial law days, Marnie was incarcerated because, during those times, love of country, patriotism, and, rebelling against the abuses of the government at that time was not allowed. So he was incarcerated briefly, and later on he was released. And this is one of the poems he wrote for his country. The heart has its home, the only country it needs. It may have traveled far, but it finds its way back. It may have suffered fate or earned lofty honors, but is as poor as when it left, and now bends its knees. Only you, my dearest, are the memory I keep. On your shoulder I lay my head. After everything is finished, here, love, you live inside my breast, sailing all oceans I need for nowhere else. You are my north, my east. After sailing all oceans, you are the only shore I seek. So, Marna supported the advocacy of nationalist poets like Rafi Banzuela and Merlita Lorena Tariman, who died a few years back. And his foreboding about the future of our country, the Philippines, is reflected in his poem, Philippine Pastoral. At the edge of the sugarcane field, the water buffalo stopped to graze, and its master turned his gaze at the photographer's camera. Beyond the meadow, after the silhouetted tree line, the mountains rose in their bald majesty above a silver mist, and the clouds, perhaps a gathering storm. What to make of the scene? What does it signify, if anything at all? I will not hazard a guess or make the landscape speak my thoughts, even biases, except that this is no Amor Solos Philippine light, radiant and yellow, but an afternoon where the stage lights have been dimmed, a lazy, somnolent interlude before it is interrupted by the lowing of the carabao. How about Lucio San Pedro sa Ugoy ng Duyan playing in the background before a Vivaldi's summer storm comes thundering in? Or Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. But these are what I mean by my basis or by biases intruding, arbitrary soundtracks imposed on the scene, perhaps the postprandial notions of the landowners, the hacenderos lounging in their verandas before the orange flames lap the horizon, beyond the march of the evacuees in Peque Gallaga's Oro Plata Mata, or the bloodbath in Ben Cervantes's Sacada. What inventions of the mind, what dire forebodings for a pastoral. Written by Marna Quilates. Marne writes in 3 languages, Bicol, Filipino, and English. But I'm reciting to you some of his best English poems. Lovers of Marne Quilates, actually, according to one piece here in one blog spot, says that his literary achievements will appreciate his presence as he meticulously organizes complete works, his poetry, excerpts from his books and translations, interviews and reviews of his work, and more. His legacy can be found in his website titled Marne Scripts. Okay, Marne Scripts. The scripts there is spelled with a K. Okay, let me tell you briefly about his personal life. Would that be interesting to you? Okay, Marnie has until his death in July this year, he lived with a woman whom he called his um, significant other for 28 years, a woman he respected much. According to her, he never raised his voice at her, never lifted his hand at her. He always respected her all these 28 years, and all he demanded was for her to serve him food and prepare his clothes. That's all. I mean, he was a very understanding and loving husband, according to Grace Banyas. And his children also were never wanting for their father's love. They actually were visited by their father every weekend all their lives until they left for the United States to finish college there. His daughter is a microbiologist and the son is a professional manager, both in the United States. He met his wife when she was only 20, his significant other when she was only 27, courted her for 3 years, and after 3 years, they became a pair, and they lived happily until his passing on in July this year, July 22 to be exact. Friends of Marnie know him to be a very peaceful man, peace-loving. He would never fight with anyone. He was known to be an intellectual, respected for his being intellectual. People like him gathered around him naturally, and people respected him much. He was a spiritual man in unique ways. He is known to be a Catholic, but he also had Buddhist leanings. As a matter of fact, he was in my Dharma class, and many people don't know that. He was in my Buddha Dharma class until he passed on. He never left that class. It's an online class which has been running for 3 years. And in fact, his son is a Buddhist and will soon be married to another Buddhist lady. So that is Marnie Pilates. I'm now ready for questions, or shall we have the questions after everybody has finished?
Thank you. That was remarkable. When we get to know about a personality, we could have a closer outlook and in the inner, feelings of a personality. He was basically a peace-loving
Oh,
human
yes,
being.
yes,
He's
yes.
basically
And he,
when you have a closer look of a personality, you try to understand the real nature that comes out, and through his
exactly.
through his writings, through his lines, that makes a significant influence of on the people's mind. So that is the contribution that left by Marne Kilades, which was beautifully presented by Ma'am Josephine Gomez. I would
May I add a
quickly,
few more things? May I
yes,
just add a
ma'am.
few more things?
Yes, I
Um,
would also
I
quickly
was told
ask
by his significant other that his first, yes, I'll be fast. I was told by his significant other that his first love was painting. And let me tell you briefly a dream I had of him 2 nights ago. I actually was at the verge of because I didn't know there were many things I wanted to find out about him from his significant other, Grace Banyas. And I wasn't in touch with her. She wasn't replying to my messages, and I didn't know that she was busy visiting his grave in far-flung Daraga Albay, where his ashes are buried. And 2 days ago, I wanted to change my plan to talk about another poet. And then I dreamt of him. In my dream, he was painting himself. He was doing a self-portrait. And in my dream, I was talking to him, aware that he was already gone. So I told him, Marne, I didn't know you painted. And then he was smiling, just kept on going on, painting his own portrait. And then I was aware at that time in the dream that there were people waiting for me. We were going out, we were going to have fun outside. But Marne wouldn't be able to join us because he's no longer in his physical body. So I told him, Marne, you can't join us because you have left us. Why did you leave us? I told him. And then the dream was cut there. And that gave me the confirmation that I must proceed to talk about him in this program.
That was lovely. That was indeed lovely. That's a close connection, spiritual connection that happens. Maybe David, in his quick what do you call a reaction, he would say something about yours before proceeding further of this program. David, what would you say about
Yes,
Josephine
and
presentation?
I didn't know that he loved painting. It was his significant other, Grace, who revealed to me only now.
Yes.
So I said, that's probably why
Uh,
you dreamt that he was painting in his dream, because that's his first love. Anyway,
yeah.
so yeah, thank you for
David,
the
let us,
opportunity
David.
to present. Thank you,
Thank
Prasanna.
you, thank you. David, would you like to say something, or Raul or Isabel on Josephine or Marne Kilatis? Please go ahead.
Any questions?
Quickly,
Could you,
for 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Go ahead.
could you please write out his name in the chat so I know exactly how to spell it? Because I would
Okay.
love to look him up. You know, it's
Oh,
difficult.
yes. Yes, look him up. There's a lot about him in Google. Marne is M-A-R-N-E.
Money. Okay.
M-A-R-N-E. Kilates is spelled as pronounced K-I-L-A-T-E-S.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Josephine, Ma'am Josephine, for introducing Marne Kilatis. Now the turn comes to talk about Rainer Maria Rilke.
Okay.
Our Who would be talking? I mean, who else? David Leo Sirowa. David Leo Sirowa is a Canadian American poet published 157 times in 27 countries. His work has been translated in 13 languages such as Hindi, Bengali, French, Spanish. He hosts Spoken Word Online, the Zoom arm of Spoken Word Paris. His first collection, Humble Doves, Poems to Pigeons and Plants, third prize in winning writers Virgil Flomp Humor Poetry Contest. Honored for his admirable contribution to the world literature by the Fatal Brands, a renowned literary group in India. Poetry in journals such as Bombay Review, Artemis Journal, and One Hand Clapping. Singer, songwriter, radio DJ, and actor, submitting 5 manuscripts for publication as of now, and writing several more. That is about David Leo Siroa, who will be talking about Rainer Maria Rilke. David, over to you, all yours.
Thank you so much, Prasanna. So I have the great pleasure of speaking about Rainer Maria Rilke, one of my absolute heroes and the hero of many poets that I know. And I started writing poetry when I was 10 years old. I was, shown a postcard and I had to write a poem about it, and given different poetry writing exercises, and somebody would tell me to write one poem and I would write 8. So I was always a poetry loving man and child. And one poet, only Rilke, was shown to me just one time in my college studies at Bennington College, and that was Rilke. And so I was in a poetry workshop as a freshman, which was an honor to be allowed in. And the teacher, Alvin Feynman, who's a great, great poet, handed out a poem by Rilke called Abend in German, or Sunset. And it was like the introduction to great poetry. Like, this is the model poem. This is the only poem you need to see before we critique each other's poems. all semester long. So it was kind of the ideal of poetry. And so I'm going to start with reading it and then talk about it and go on from there to his other work. So this is Sunset. It's a translation by Robert Bly. Slowly the west reaches for close of new colors, which it passes to a row of ancient trees. You look, and soon both of these worlds leave you. One part climbs toward heaven, one sinks toward earth, leaving you not quite belonging to either, and not so hopelessly dark as that house that is silent, not so unswervingly given to the eternal as that thing that turns to a star each night and climbs. Leaving you, it is impossible to disentangle the threads. Leaving you your own life, timid and standing high and growing, so that sometimes blocked in, sometimes reaching out, one moment your life is a stone in you, and the next a star. I adore this poem, and it. Oh, my cat has to say something. She's typing along on the typewriter here. Okay, so one of the most inspiring poems in my life, and I was an 18-year-old, and the poem is really about who am I, where do I belong, am I going to be focused on the internal world or the external world? Who am I in this world? And it shows kind of the split in our character between, being inspired, looking up to the eternal in the form of a star, and looking to the earth that descends and grows dark, as night comes, and saying that he doesn't really belong to either one shows really the position of the poet and of humankind as, kind of alone in the universe in a sense, yet connected to everything, inspired by everything. And there's so no other writer has a stronger influence on me than Rilke, even if I don't speak German, and I translate Paul Valéry, great French poet. But the last big project that Rilke took on, and I never heard this until recently, was translating Paul Valéry. And he did a lot of work studying his contemporary, and great stuff respecting his fellow poet in that way. So let's start by looking at that poem where he says, slowly the west reaches for close of new colors, which it passes to a row of ancient trees. So the color of the sunset is just painted everywhere in such a gorgeous and all-encompassing way, and taken on as like a coat by the trees. I love that. And so one of these worlds leaves you and one goes toward earth. I talked about that. So in any case, we go on, and the thing with Rilke at times is he'll surprisingly address the reader. And it's not so startling as, let's say, Baudelaire, that suddenly at the end of a poem says, "You hypocrite reader, my brother, my double," where he's kind of screaming at the reader. Rilke says, you in this very gentle way is like, all of you who are living on earth and having this dual nature of upliftedness and discouragedness, or heavenliness and earthliness. So I love how he addresses the reader in that surprising way. In another poem, Archaic Torso of Apollo, he surprisingly says at the end, "You must change your life." That's a pretty bold statement. And so he breaks the fourth walls, let's say, between the poet on the stage of the page and the audience reading anywhere out in the world. he breaks that fourth wall and talks to an audience member off stage, which is the reader, and it's quite fascinating. I love how he does that, and it's taught me so much about poetry. And you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, the speaker in my poem," and this and that. And for me, the speaker is always myself, and I address the reader personally sometimes, and I make fun of myself and all of that. So I've become a kind of a Woody Allen character in my own poems, and I like that poet being oneself and speaking to the reader in a personal way. It makes it kind of okay to be as awkward as standing between these two worlds, because we all perhaps feel awkward. So I love great other poems from him, like The Panther, and I'll read a bit from that. But so at a certain point, Rilke became the secretary of the great sculptor Auguste Rodin in Paris, and he learned from Rodin, who said to him, "Travailler, travailler, travailler," working, working, working. And he said that genius is the product of constant work. He doesn't say like, "Oh, some people are born with a star in their head," or whatever. It's the result of work, and I really love that. So he went to the zoo, which Rodin told him to do, and he said, look at an animal until you really see it. And he ends up seeing it from the animal's point of view. So this is from his poem, The Panther. And he says, his vision from the constantly passing bars has grown so weary that it cannot hold anything else. It seems to him that there are 1,000 bars, and behind the bars, no world. So the panther feels so imprisoned in this description, and Rilke takes on this inner feeling of this animal after really having studied and sat with it and imagined, what does this animal feel? How does the world look to the panther? And it's incredible the amount of compassion that's in that. And so moving on from there, Rilke invented something called in German, it's a Dingedicht, the thing poem, where he, like the Imagist movement at the time, and like the painters of his time, would take one object and really look at it until he really saw it, as I said, and describe a poem with the utmost clarity of like this physical object, like truly describing it as kind of a concentrated reality, as its own power. And he often capitalizes the word things, and I really love that mysteriousness. So on the other hand, he's a poet of the inner life, interiority, and you can see that in some of his other poems, like just even in the title of this poem, Exposed on the Cliffs of the Heart. So we have someone just completely like stranded on this inner place. And so Rilke is really the poem of the thing, the outer world and observation, as well as being the poet of the inner life. It's really a gorgeous kind of double nature that he has in this brilliant way. And so the moving on in the poem, The Panther, he says, as he paces in cramped circles over and over, the movement of his powerful, soft strides, like a ritual dance around a center in which a mighty will stands paralyzed. So once again, he's compassionating with the panther, to use a Walt Whitman term. In any case, I adore that poem. I'll take this performance art poem here. The drinking of the water, the ceremony that we all must do. So I love the transition Rilke had into his later poetry. And so I'm going to finish off just talking about the sonnets to Orpheus. And by the way, the book that preceded it, the Duino Elegies, I highly recommend. And I'm the only person that I know among the maybe more than 1,000 poets that I know from spoken word Paris. Um, I'm the only person that I know who's read the entire Duino Elegies, and it's absolutely incredible. But I'll finish by just reading something from the sonnets to Orpheus. And so it begins in this truly exclamatory way, full of praise. And Rilke truly believes in praise as the job of the poet. So he says, a tree ascended there, O pure transcendence, O Orpheus sings, O tall tree in the ear, and all things hushed. Yet even in that silence, a new beginning, beckoning, change appeared. Creatures of stillness crowded from the bright, unbound forest out of their lairs and nests. And it was not from any dullness, not from fear, that they were so quiet in themselves, but just from listening. Bellow, roar, shriek seemed small inside their hearts. And where there had been at most a makeshift hut to receive the music, a shelter nailed up out of their darkest longing, with an entryway that shuddered in the wind, you built a temple deep inside their hearing. So I'll end with that. Rilke, like Orpheus, builds a temple inside the reader and takes him there or her and guides them through an inner and an outer journey. So I look up to him as a great hero, and thanks for listening.
Indeed, Temple, and I could see how inspired you are by his writings through his different, phases of your life. Is such a remarkable personality, and how you got influenced, and how you got started writing poetry. Taking his example as David, thank you for introducing, talking about Rilke. And I would briefly ask, quickly ask Ral or Josephine, ma'am, or Isabel to react on David's, presentation. Yes, ma'am. Ral, Josephine, ma'am, or Isabel, anybody quickly would react.
Okay,
Unmute.
Miss, Rilke is a wonderful poet, and I
Okay,
don't know that
okay.
well, but I really appreciate your talking about it because it's more education for me, and that's great. Thank you so much for your presentation. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let me tell you what I was saying earlier, not knowing that my mic was muted. I was excited about your presentation because he is a very well-known lyricist of Lieder. Lieder, for the information of others who may not know, it actually means German art songs. And I'm a soprano who loves singing Lieder, German Lieder. And I know for a fact that some Lieder that I have sung were actually written by Rainer Maria Rilke. And some of the titles of his songs are Herbsttag, Das Land ist Licht, Lebensanfang, which means the beginning of love, Eingang, which is gate or entrance, der Tod der Geliebten, or the death of the beloved, Einsamkeit, or a lonesome, being lonesome, solitude, Einsamkeit. No, I'm sorry. Einsamkeit is loneliness, solitude, something like that. Anyway, Die Liebende, the loving, And then he wrote a poem on lead, on song, and it's titled Lead. And then, of course, he has another poem titled Liebeslied. And I observed that when he composed in German, okay, I'm reading his German poetry right now. When he composed in German, he was particular about rhyme and meter. Okay. Anyway, this is your presentation. I'm sorry to have added so much. I'm just so in love with the real kid
It's
myself.
absolutely okay when you get reacted.
Thank you.
No, yeah, that was something. Thank you, David. Thank you. It's a beautiful
Thank you very much for your
presentation.
presentation.
Overwhelming.
Thank you.
Our next, let's proceed to the next guest who will be talking about Emily Dickinson, very well-known poet. Peace is, okay, what do you call it? So Isabel Van Merlin, MA in Creative Arts, Divine Science practitioner, and given epithet of badass, editor by Mary Read. From Formatting Mary's Divine New Being and Humanity's Epic Awakening. Started writing poetry in 2008 from attending Speak Up, the open mic in Lynn, Massachusetts. She started her own open mic in Newbury Port in 2013, which soon migrated to Merrimack, Mass, to claim its place name Merrimack Mike. In its 10 years, Isabel edited and compiled 8 anthologies. She taught creative writing, memoir, as well as ESL and Spanish, and published Turkish Odyssey, an epic memoir of working on an archaeological excavation. She has also published several other non-fiction books. In addition to Mary Mack anthologies, she has been published in several anthologies. Descent, 4 annual 30 for November, Center for New Americans, many Kuch Behar, anthologies of Saura Sircar, Persian Sugar with English Tea, periodicals. She has been published in burnbeforereading.com, New Thought magazine of INTA, Rock Poetry, Plow Quarterly, and she can be contacted at this email that's given. So she will be talking about Emily Dickinson. So to you, email, Isabel.
Thank you,
Please
Prasanna.
unmute you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, and I really appreciate this invitation. I'm not an educated poet. I never had a class of poetry well, I mean, I had a few poems in high school, that sort of thing, my English classes. But so when you asked me to speak about a favorite poet, Prasanna, it was just really off the top of my head. And I guess one of the reasons I chose Emily Dickinson, my mother's first name was Emily, and we never got along. So also, Emily Dickinson lived most of her life she was a very solitary person, never married. She lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, and the university there, University of Massachusetts at Amherst, is a very well-respected university, but she didn't really have anything to do with that. It's Western Massachusetts, very much country, and her lifetime, she was born in 1830 and died in 1886. And so she lived through the Civil War, the American Civil War. In the South, it's called the War Between the States. I was born and raised in South Carolina, so, but my mother was a Yankee, so I have this kind of mixed perspective on life. But one of the things she's in my opinion, she's a fabulous poet. She was a mystic, a very, very spiritual person, and that really appeals to me. My greatest spiritual teacher, Emma Curtis Hopkins, lived during that time, 1849 to 1925. And Emily lived in this period of a lot of spiritual growth in the United States. It was the time of the Transcendentalists, Thoreau, Emerson, well, and there's Mary Baker Eddy of Christian Science, and these people. But again, she was very, very solitary, and she wrote many, I mean, most of her poems have to do with nature and life and death. And I have this collection of her poems, the collected poems of Emily Dickinson that is it gonna, I'm sorry, it just says collected poems of Emily Dickinson. Her niece evidently wrote the introduction to this book, and it's just awful. In my opinion, I Googled her niece, Martha Dickinson Bianchi, and she's a very sour looking woman, very dour. Okay, and in this introduction, she says, she lived with a God we do not believe in. And I'm going, what? You know, what do you mean? She capitalized God, but then, okay, she lived with a God we do not believe in and trusted in an immortality we do not deserve in that confiding age when duty ruled over pleasure before the Puritan became a hypocrite. Holy smokes, what kind of, not, in my opinion, it's not a very good, you know, what do I want to say? Not very supportive of her aunt and her poetry. Well, so again, I thought I was going to be speaking primarily of what Emily wrote about peace, but so this very short poem, peace is a fiction of our faith. Peace is a fiction of our faith, the bells a winter night, bearing the neighbor out of sound that never did alight. And so, in my opinion, I mean, I have the same opinion of peace, and only in the last couple of years did I finally understand the Bible quote about the peace that passes all understanding. And what that means to me is that peace, real peace, is a state of being. And there is no thought. Peace, living in this state, passes understanding, because to understand means you must think. So to arrive at a state of peace, even meditation is not going to work, because in my experience, meditation, I'm just trying always to get rid of thought. So it's the I am, and leaving off the pronoun to just be am, to arrive at peace. But her poems, I mean, they're just delightful. Many of them are so delightful. Here's this one. A toad can die of light. Death is the common right of toads and men, of earl and midge. The privilege, why swagger thin? The gnat's supremacy is large as thine. I mean, I just love that, you know, so are we any more important than a gnat or a mosquito or a toad? Not really. But we're immortal. We have immortal life, if you believe in reincarnation or life after death. But anyway, again, she has a great sense of humor, but she can also be extremely serious. I was going to say that she really doesn't involve herself with poetry or with comments about the war. I mean, it was just horrible. The death, the bloodshed in the Civil War was just horrible in this country. But so I never hear the word escape without a quicker blood, a sudden expectation, a flying attitude. I never hear of prisons broad by soldiers battered down, but I tug childish at my bars only to fail again. To try to escape the imprisonment, that of this life of not being able to get away from the war and violence that is always present, it seems to me, especially now at this time on the globe. Here's another poem. Again, the way she expresses things it really is delightful, I think. You cannot put a fire out. A thing that can ignite can go itself without a fan upon the slowest night. You cannot fold a flood and put it in a drawer because the winds would find it out and tell your cedar floor. I mean, who would think of trying to fold a flood and put it in a drawer? But, do levees work? I don't know. It's very serious, but it's also, I don't know. I don't know. She just really appeals to me. Here's sort of about peace. A chilly peace infests the grass. The sun respectful lies. Not any trance of industry these shadows scrutinize. Whose allies go no more astray for surface or for glee, but all mankind deliver here from whatsoever sea. So, when the dew is still on the grass in the morning, there's peace. It infests the grass until the sun comes up. So, let's see. Here's another one. Okay. The only ghost I ever saw was dressed in Mechlin. I'm not sure what that is. So he wore no sandal on his foot and stepped like flakes of snow. His gait was soundless like the bird, but rapid like the roe. His fashions quaint, mosaic, or haply mistletoe. His conversation seldom, his laughter like the breeze that dies away in dimples among the pensive trees. Our interview was transient. Of me, himself was shy. And God forbid I look behind since that appalling day. So she tries to have a conversation with a ghost. They're everywhere, right? She does talk a lot about death, but to my way of thinking, it's just our death is just the next step to our spiritual life, our ascension to spirit. Let's see. Let's see. Here's another short one. I many times thought peace had come when peace was far away. As wrecked men deem they sight the land at center of the sea, and struggle slacker but to prove, as hopelessly as I, how many the fictitious shores before the harbor lie. Now, what do we see as humans? What do we think we're seeing when we look at the world from our perspective? You know, is it there? Is it a fictitious shore that we're going to see at the edge, beyond the harbor? Anyway, so I just she wrote hundreds of poems. They're usually very short, maybe only a couple of quatrains, and I just well, here's one more, because we're going into fall starting now. The morns are meeker than they were. The nuts are getting brown. The berry's cheek is plumper. The rose is out of town. The maple wears a gayer scarf. The field a scarlet gown. Lest I should be old-fashioned, I'll put a trinket on. No. So really, that's all I have to say about her. She's fabulous. She's very well known here. And anyway, and I just moved to California in February. So before that, I was living in New Hampshire and Massachusetts for 22 years. So I feel a connection. My immigrant parents, ancestors 400 years ago, all came to New England. So I feel that kind of a connection with her too. She's wonderful. And thank you for this opportunity to share her words.
Thanks.
And don't think of yourself as just being a gnat. Okay, you're a very important poet gnat with a lot of things to say. And we have immortality. So thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Peace is a state of being, a a thoughtless state, indeed. She's a remarkable personality. How beautifully you presented your perspective on the life of Jane Emily and her, her writings that influence you.
Thank you.
So beautifully analyzed, given a beautiful analysis. Ma'am Josephine, Raul, David, Leo, would you like to say something about Isabel, the presentation of Emily Dickinson?
Thank you so much for your talk. It was delightful the way you quoted so many vivacious lines and showed her vivacious mind as well. And I love what you said about the peace that passeth understanding. And I meditate every day. And my guru said, meditation is whatever happens when you sit down to meditate. So it could be anything at all, thoughts and all. Anyhow, that was really enlightening about Emily Dickinson, delightful and educational too. Thank you.
Yeah. Enjoy. Yeah. You're muted, Josephine. You're muted again. Okay. Yeah.
Wait, could you hear me now?
I can hear you.
you?
Yes. Yes.
But
No, you're still muted. You muted yourself again.
okay, there. Okay,
Yes.
when you mentioned stopping thought is so difficult, that is meditation. That's the beginning of meditation. But
Right.
eventually, you will know that you don't really have to be at war with your thoughts. It will come naturally as you keep on practicing and as long as you understand what the objective is and what the proper posture and objectives of meditation are. I will not
No, I
discuss
mean,
much of it here.
I'm sorry, but you've got it. You've got the wrong perspective. There's nothing wrong with meditation. We
No, I
wouldn't
didn't
be
say there's something wrong about it.
no, no, I'm just saying that meditation is thought, and I want to go beyond thought. I couldn't be a
Ah,
poet
okay,
if I
okay,
didn't
okay.
think, But peace
Okay.
is
So you
not
said,
a product
uh-huh.
of meditation, in my
So
opinion.
you said that thought is necessary for meditation. Is that what you said?
No, not at all. I'm saying that when you meditate, and my experience is when I meditate, I am trying to clear my mind of thought, and it
Okay,
doesn't
okay,
work. We are, as
But
living, breathing human beings, we must think, okay?
okay.
But to
May I say
reach
my
peace,
piece? May I say my piece? Okay. In the
yes,
beginning, one struggles to stop thought because you really shouldn't have any thought during meditation. But eventually you will not be at war anymore with your thoughts. You will leave thought because you're not
okay.
really supposed to be thinking while meditating. Anyway, that's my comment. If you wish
Yes,
to
yes, yes.
discuss
You
this
have
further,
the
we can
It's,
discuss it in another venue.
yeah,
Isabel,
Okay, wait, wait,
I'm
Isabel,
sorry.
I think your analogy to peace and thought and meditation are bang on.
Thank you.
What you extrapolated from Miss Dickinson, because it is impossible to not have thoughts, period. But
Exactly.
peace itself, the way we think of peace, is we want something that when we sit and really analyze it, it's just nothing. It's a state of being. It's a
Exactly.
state of nothing. And I love the analogy of, what do you see? The perspective of what do you see? Because everything is in our heads anyway. So I really love that presentation. I loved how you connected it personally,
Yeah.
how you personally connected to her words and her poetry, because it was about your experience and what she's done for you. And hopefully maybe through her poetry, it made you or help you to understand your mother differently or get closer
Oh,
to you. I don't know. I'm just saying. Just saying.
yes.
exactly,
Bless my mother.
exactly.
She was my mother, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
anyway, here I am. Thank you, mother.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you,
That was good.
Isabel.
I
That was
enjoyed that. I
lovely.
enjoyed that.
Well, I just
We
reacted to that
really,
thing about, the need to think. In meditation, there shouldn't be any thinking.
Okay.
Anyway, that's
Very
my
good.
point of view.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's
Let's
what I
move
know.
across. Let's move on to our, yes, next we'll be talking about George Eliot Clark. He's very close to me and he's a student of life. Raul, I am James. And thus, life is his greatest teacher. He is a leadership and spiritual coach committed to doing his part in uplifting our human consciousness through empowering and inspiring others to love and be empathetic with themselves. A native of Trinidad and Tobago, Raul's formative years unfolded against the diverse backdrops of Brooklyn, New York, Los Angeles, California, and Washington, D.C. He subsequently established his adult life in Toronto, Canada, after which a chapter of his narrative transpired in Kelowna, British Columbia. After 17 years, Raul returned to Toronto where the adventure continues. Raul has appeared as a featured artist at Cobalt Poets, Beehive, Spoken Word, Gestalt Open Mic, Pop Chat. He has several poems selected for various anthologies and has authored 2 poetry books, Truth, Experienced, and Inflow with Grace. Presently, he is a founder, producer, and host of Inspired Poetry Corner. Home is the Heart Open Mic and a fellow of International Academy of Ethics. He is committed to creating space and events that spotlight the brilliance of our humanity. Raul continues to embody the spirit of You going to, and am because you are. I'm because you are, was he's always, highlights. So he'd be talking about George Eliot Clark. Welcome to the show, Ral. We are honored to have you.
The brown girl, golden, sable-eyed, flourishing yellow hibiscus, steps exuberant, August into August. Her lushly barricaded golden silk sari, lavishing honey light at her auburn feet, sandaled cedarly, with scent of sandalwood haloing her. Her individualized, warm, light dark body, her every glance a direction of the air. Her look of mischievous, even taught sweetness, oh, she was, coming from the morning's slight autumnal chill. Her feet moistened with the dynamic drew, how the sea summers in grass, that same grass that rears at the sun, while butterflies mob Famigachis. Behold her smile declaring warm, sun-dried terracotta lips that chants, come home, and I answer. You are light uplifting, liberating me from muck, from an inferno of squander. Oh, let there be rum and molasses, rice and mackerel, O muse. The Indian Ocean softening and sweetening the Atlantic this August autumn. All these pleasures will be proof. Lotus-like slow motion lightning, ivory gold fountaining from earth like you, a fresh light sprung from earth. That is a poem, Discourse of Pure Virtue by George Eliot Clark from his book, Blue, published in 2001. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity and honor to be among such members of my human family to talk about poetry and to talk about poets. I really don't know Mr. Eliot. I actually just made contact with Mr. Eliot. So when Prasanna asked me to participate in this, I thought, what Canadian poets do I really know and who would I really want to speak of? And actually, I did think of the person in one of the screens here, David, because I know he's Canadian. And then I thought of a couple of poets that I have tremendous respect for that I worked with back where I lived in Kelowna, British Columbia, Aaron Scott and Cole Nash. I thought of my friend Marianne Telf that lives here. I thought of the traditional poet that most people think of, Margaret Atwood, Michael Odeji, but I decided to go with George because we both wear glasses. We both identify as the Black persuasion within our human family. He's a professor today at the University of Toronto, and I live in Toronto. So I took it as an opportunity, not just to introduce a poet to you, but to myself as well. Someone that we really don't know. I've heard of him, but I really don't know much about him. So I took the opportunity to share my education with you today on George Eliot Clark. He's a poet, a novelist, a playwright, a critic. He was born in Windsor, Nova Scotia. He grew up in Halifax, which is in Eastern Canada. He earned his BA from the University of Waterloo, his master's from Dalhousie University, his PhD from Queen's University. He served as a poet laureate of Toronto from 2012 to 2015. And he was a Canadian Parliamentary Poet Laureate from 2016 to 2017. So no doubt he's well accomplished. The reason why I started with that poem, because George is a poet, a man that definitely identifies strongly with his Canadian American Mi'kmaq ancestry. His mother's ancestors arrived in Canada as American slaves that were liberated by the British in the War of 1812, the actual war that the Americans lost. Right? So he speaks proudly of his background, from where he came from the blacks that originally came from the south of the United States and traveled all the way up through Canada, many passing through Chatham and Windsor, Ontario, and then making their way to Eastern Canada. On the surface, that poem sounds like a poem that's really about, I would say it's about the feelings for a local woman, a local girl that maybe he or someone had affections for, right? A lushly brocaded golden silk sari, lavishing honey light at her auburn feet, sandal cedarly with scent of sandalwood haloing her. Sounds like young love, admiration. But as I read this poem, I also realized, to me, the love possibly could be that of freedom as well, of people leaving lands that weren't so kind to them. You are light, uplifting, liberating me from muck, from an inferno of squalor. Kind of as people coming into a land of milk and honey. Let there be rum and molasses, rice and mackerel, O muse. So when I read this, I saw through metaphors and through his phrasing hidden meanings, and maybe it's not hidden to me, or maybe it's not hidden, but I look forward to actually talking with him because, like I said, I reached out to him and he answered back, and we're going to try and set up a video chat, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person, because I really like to understand his poetry and behind his poetry, what the meanings are. So I have that opportunity to talk to a living legend and to sit down to understand without guessing what meanings he was hoping to accomplish. Because a lot of his poetry is talking about the experiences of the time that many Blacks in Canada felt and faced. So I thought that was a very interesting poem. It's one of the reasons I wanted to start with it. I think it's a very strong poem. It kind of gives you an understanding, maybe a little bit more of an insight to a man who is very well accomplished, as I said. He's a seventh-generation Canadian of American African descent. Right, his mother's arrival in Canada as as an American slave liberated by the British. Right, he had described 3 Mile Plains, the town where his grandparents lived, as a Black Eden, their first inspiration of freedom. That's why that poem, that's why I think this poem talks about that, because his grandparents are very important to him. He also talks about the first time he fell in love with poetry. Right? When he was 15 and 3 Mile Plains was their lotus, Clark wrote in an article for Canadian Geographic, the day I became a poet on February 12, 1977, my 17th birthday, when my mother and I drove to 3 Mile Plains on a sunny, frigid, snowy morning. That day, as I trudged up and down hilly, white dusted, green streets, I drafted in my head a poem, my first attempt to sing a Black, a Nova Scotian, an Afro-Canadian consciousness. This is why I believe his poetry is not just about what's on the surface. Like all of us poets, there are always hidden meanings through our metaphors, through our phrasings. Right? His poetry is also a history lesson of a time that's gone by, of the hope and the peace that many people sought. sounds very familiar to today. Not much difference. He'll talk about racism, I call prejudice discrimination, that many Blacks who came to Canada seeking freedom, seeking peace, that found it in the land and found it with some of the people, but also experienced the opposite with the land and with the people. This is why I find this first poem very interesting. Right? I love the way he writes. I love the way he thinks. Another reason why I like to meet this man. Another one of his poems, the Ballad of Othello Clemens. There's a black wind howling by Walhalla Falls. There's a mad rain hammering the flowers. There's a shotgunned man moldering in petals. There's a killer chuckling to himself. There's a mother keening her poised son. There's a joker ambling over his bones. Go down to the Sickabucks River, hear it cry. Othello Clemens is dead and his murderers free. O song from Walhalla Falls and lived by sweat, walk that dark road between desire and regret. He pitched lumber, crushed rock, calloused his hands. He wasn't a saint, but he was a man. Scratched Seville, shot him and emptied his skull, tore a hole in his gut only death could fill. Now his martyred mother witness in cries over his corpse, cankered white by lilies. There's a black wind snaking by Walhalla Falls. There's a river of blood in Jarvis County. There's a government that don't know how to weep. There's a mother who can't get no sleep. Go down to the Sickabucks, hear it moan like a childless mother far, far from home. There's a chance that's going to come. Sorry, there's a change that's going to have to come. I said, a change that's going to have to come. And that's a piece from his book, Walhalla Falls of 2001. Again, on the surface, it's a poem that speaks against violence or talks about violence against Black people and the injustices felt through the story of this one man. But it's also deeper than that. It's also about the injustices that the people felt, not just from the land, the people aboard the land, but even the government. There's a government that doesn't know how to weep, doesn't know how to weep because maybe it does not see people that looked like me. There's a mother who cannot sleep. How can a mother sleep when knowing her son is under constant persecution? So I love these poems, at least for my uneducated mind, because I, like you, Isabel, I was not trained as a poet. I took no classes. I still really don't understand a lot of different poetic measures, but I understand what resonates in my heart and what I feel, even when I'm writing and even when I'm reading it. And as I read these pieces, I feel like I'm uncovering history, not just what the surface poem wants to tell you. History of a time here in Canada when it was very white and not covered with snow, white with the Caucasian people, but also the many different tribes of Indians. And here you come as a visitor into this new land, hoping for peace and finding some, but also finding what you were familiar from where you left. Because it's our human nature just to fear what we don't know. And that same discrimination and prejudice exists today in many people's minds. That's why I love that line that you used from Emily Dickinson. Racism is all in the mind today, that it always was. But in those times, it was more physical. It was in the laws. Now it's in the laws of our mind. It's in our perception. So these poems still offer insight in how we could learn and what not to do, because it is filled with history. And we've run into many people like Scratch Seville, who has shot and killed our spirit because of words. But we're the ones that allow these words to affect us because they're just words at the end of the day, spoken by people of prejudice and discrimination that speaks of their ignorance and their own fear. So that hopefully one day all mothers can sleep. Right? I think it's a brilliant piece, brilliant piece. Another reason why I want to meet this man. I love the way he thinks, and I'd like to understand more of how he thinks and why he thinks the way he does, right? So his work reflects his interest in Black culture from an Atlantic Canada perspective, and experience the identity that he describes as Afro-Acadian. He has explored the cultural and social histories of Black Canadians across various genres, frequently braiding together research and personal experience. He's authored various novels, Walhalla Falls in 1990, which he also adopted into for radio and the stage, right? He's written for operas like Beatrice Clancy. He's well accomplished, but I love the way he thinks. I love the way he sees. Here's another poem that I really enjoy, Blues for X. Pretty boy, towel your tears and robe yourself in black. Pretty boy, dry your tears. You know I'm coming back. I'm your lavish lover, and I'm your slavish in the sack. Call me sweet potato, sweet pea, or sweetie pie. There's sugar on my lips and honey in my thighs. Josephine Baker baked beans, but I stew pigtails in rye. My bones are guitar strings, my blues the chords that you strum. My bones are slender flutes, and blues the bars you hum. You want to stay, my man? Serve me whiskey when I come. That's another piece from Walhalla Falls. Again, on the surface, to me, it seems like a poem about death, untimely death, particularly in the Black communities, right? Again, remembering the times that these were probably written, turn of the century, early 20th century, right? But call me sweet potato, sweet pea, sweet pie. You know, those are foods only associated with Black, particularly Black culture. Not that others don't, but it's associated. And I wear it proudly because I love sweet potato and I love sweet potato pie. So I wear it proudly. But I love the line of Josephine Baker, baked beans, speaking of a particular time. And when we stew pigtails and rye, again, speaking of a particular time. But these are foods too we would gather and eat in a wake, in a celebration of a life. So then too, this could be a poem of lives taken too soon. Pretty boy, towel your eyes and robe yourself in black. Pretty boy, dry your eyes, you know I'm coming back. I'd love to know what he meant by that line. You know I'm coming back, because if I've gone, how can I come back? Come back in spirit. Talked about reincarnation in the last presentation. The hidden meanings of these words, they're brilliant. They don't just speak of what we see on the surface, but they speak of the history. They speak of a time gone by. Do those times still exist today to some degree in some facet? They always will. Because prejudice and discrimination is a mental thing. And unless you can control people thinking, how can you ever get rid of it? So can we still find peace within the discrimination and prejudice of life? So I love that piece. I think I have maybe one more, maybe two more I'd like to read to you to give you a flavor. Hopefully I'm doing this man justice. George Eliot Clark. Your scuttle pays, your scuttle pays floats fiery in the ether, blazing. It vomits smudge smoke. Your mind chars black because you're moth-like, too near the flame. You douse your dream, scorched brain with slave sweat rum, the only goal you can own, corroding your liver. Your anthem plays to gunfire when you think about it, when you can breathe. After all the lies that frame nostalgia, all the death faces that occupy photographies, all the slain love is pitched into ditches. Your eyes itch and ache with water, then dry, curling like dead leaves, starving for gold's fire. That's another piece from his book, Blue. The story on the surface is about alcoholism and survival of it, the survivor's guilt that exists. But it could be about any addiction, it could be about anything. It could even be about the racism, the prejudice, discrimination that many have practiced. How many people have the guilt for that practice, for that thinking? Look at what we do in society today when we try to make white people feel guilty for what ancestors had done, that somehow their guilt and shame is going to be the penance of blood that's going to right a wrong. All it does, it just makes it wrong. Because if it was wrong then, how can it be right today? So I love the hidden meanings in his poetry, right? The invitation that it gives, it invites you to look at things maybe differently, to understand the history. Because when I read this, I'm not reading a man that's filled with venom because of what has happened. I'm reading an invitation to look back at history, to maybe be able to bring it forward and go, how are we conducting ourselves better today? So to me, it's a story about overcoming. It's a story of acceptance, accepting that the past that we come from, but the past that we come from does not have to be practiced today unless we choose to look at the past more holistic, with empathy and not with fear. Because when you look at the past with fear, it blinds you to what's going on today. It has you swimming in seas of guilt and shame. And as a man that walks around with black as a pigmentation, not a condemnation of race, because there's only one race on this planet, but a celebration of my pigmentation, because I celebrate it. Why? Because it's mine. I didn't choose it, but it's mine, and I celebrate it. And I do not fear anyone that looked like this from back in the day. Maybe they were slaves, but they were also more than just slaves. So when I call on the ancestors, I call on all the ancestors, not just the ones that we think are good and strong warriors, all of them, the thieves, the robbers, the principals, the teachers, the whores, the bankers, all of them. And I call on all the ancestors that are not just this pigmentation, because everyone that came before me and everything that has happened before me has got me here today. This is why I love this poem, Exile. Exiling from what? Exiling from the violence, from the guilt of our past. And I'll close this off with one last piece. I hope I have done Mr. Clark justice in presenting a poet that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you don't, because he wasn't very familiar to me. Like I said, I know of the name, but I really didn't know much about the man, and it prompted me to reach out to him. And to my surprise, he responded, and he's keen on connecting. So we're going to try and set up a video chat and like I said, hopefully get together. But if you like what I've presented, he's got many things. Like I said, he's an author of numerous collections of poetry, including Saltwater Spirituals and Deeper Blues that he wrote in 1983, and Lush Dreams, Blues Exile, Fugitive Poems, Execution Poems, The Black Arcadian Tragedy of George and Rue, which won the Governors General Literary Award, Illuminated Verses, Black, and the dramatic poem Trudeau, Long March, Shining Path. I will end my presentation with this final piece.
That was lovely, sir. It was overwhelming.
Hold on, can I? Sorry. Can I do this last poem? Or are we running out of time?
I'm afraid, yeah, we're running out of time.
Well, then that works out fine. I'll leave it at
no,
I'm fine with it. I'll leave it with it.
But let me say, it's so imbibing. I love the way you presented. In fact, all the panel members out here, how they owned each poet, and everyone is influenced and impressed. How, I mean, it is great learning today. I was, as I was listening to you all, it's remarkable. And the way Isabel talked about Emily and David, about Rilke, Ma'am Josephine talked about Pilates, generated, curiosity to learn more and to understand more about these poets. So I wish Roopali ma'am would be here with us, but she couldn't make it. Otherwise, she would have been very happy to, to share her words, to share her reaction. But we miss her. Hopefully, she is watching. She would watch later. But I was thankful to all of you. I mean, for putting out your viewpoints and perspective on respective poets that you talked about. It's a great learning for me, especially. And I request all the viewers and the audience to watch for this. Keep a watch on this piece and wait for the what do you call it, announcement for the next Poets Speak of Poets. We are the world and we are the people, and we strive for the peace and poetry through poetry. Thank you. Until next time. So wonderful, very remarkable.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
See you on Sunday.